Hey Procraftinators! Today I'm part of another Team Tiny video hop. Our theme is sweets and I have a sweet treat in store for you today. I will be making a fun working gumball machine card, except my gumball machine is filled with M&Ms. I'll explain that a little later in the video. I will also go over the Team Tiny hop, what it's about, and how it works here in a little bit. Let's get to this card. I stamped my gumball machine image from Concord 9th's I Choose You stamp set using Gina K amalgam ink on Bristol smooth cardstock because I plan to watercolor this image using my Arteza Real Brush pens. I find that I reach for the Gina K amalgam ink when I plan to color images because I don't have to think about ink compatibility, as it's safe with alcohol markers, watercoloring, Gamsol, etc. My pad is getting a little dry, so I did have to stamp it a few times to get a nice crisp image. I need to get myself a re-inker for this pad. I cleaned off the stamp and I grabbed another piece of cardstock. I did my best to ink up just the handle of the gumball machine and I stamped it out 5 times. I wanted to layer this piece up for a nice thick handle that could actually be turned and allow the candies to come out. Off screen I fussy cut out just the handle, went around the edges of the white cardstock with a black Memento pen, colored the top piece of the handle with the same gray Arteza Real Brush pen that I colored the gray parts on the gumball machine, which you'll see later, and then glued the handle piece one on top of the other. After gluing them together, I still needed to make it stronger, because after all, the handle is still paper, and in my prototype it didn't hold up real well. My other issue was that it was being glued to a brad, and the bottom layer of the paper did not want to stay attached to the brad. It just kind of peeled off when the handle got turned. My solution to this was to cover the bottom of the handle in a couple thin coats of glossy accents. I only showed me doing one coat on screen, but I ended up doing a second coat for good measure before I attached the handle to the brad later on. So I did a thin coat, and then because I'm impatient, I carefully dried it with my heat tool. Then I covered the top of the handle with glossy accents as well. The top layer is how you would normally use glossy accents to make a piece shiny. So this also makes the handle stronger, but gives it a nice shine too. I set this piece aside to dry. Next, I colored the gumball machine with my Arteza Real Brush pens. I will flash the colors on the screen for you, but I kept the coloring fairly simple. I didn't do anything fancy here. As I have said in videos before, I am not much of a colorist, and I often leave the coloring out of my videos for this reason. I just put some color in where I felt that it would be darkest, and then I pulled the color out with my water brush. I did go over the red sections of this gumball machine twice to make it darker, since watercolors do dry back, and I wasn't looking to have a pink gumball machine. Remember that this is stamped on Bristol smooth cardstock. These types of markers work best on this type of cardstock due to the coating that Bristol has on it. It helps you blend out the colors, and the smooth finish won't hurt your brush tips. It is fairly sturdy cardstock too, so it can handle a bit of water. Not quite as much as watercolor paper, but more than regular cardstock can handle. While I'm coloring, I'm going to take this opportunity to talk about the Team Tiny Hop, what it's about, and how it works, if you aren't familiar with it. Team Tiny is a group of small YouTubers who have less than 1,000 subscribers, so we aren't monetized, meaning you won't have to sit through any ads while watching our videos on our channels or throughout this hop. The main purpose of our monthly hops is to help small channels grow, so we would greatly appreciate it if you would like, comment, and subscribe to our channels. These things greatly help us get noticed through the YouTube algorithm. Interaction on our channels is the only way that YouTube knows that you like our content and will suggest it to others. Lastly, and most importantly, in order to hop along, all you need to do is click on the hashtag TeamTinySweets, which you will find in the title and the description box of my videos for easy access. Once you click that hashtag, it will bring up all the other videos from the creators participating in this hop, and you can binge away. You won't want to miss what they have in store for you. Next, I decided to stamp the inside of the gumball globe. That way, when the candy is gone, there is still something there, besides a blank space. I did this before die cutting the globe out of the machine. The stamp set includes a couple little candy pieces to choose from. I decided to go with the solid circle piece. I picked colors from my ink pad stash that sort of matched the colors of M&Ms. I will flash the colors on the screen as I stamp them. The reason I chose to fill the gumball machine with M&Ms, besides the fact that they are small candies and would fit in the card without making it super thick, was because when I was little, my great-grandparents had a gumball machine, and it was filled with M&Ms. It never had anything else in it, it was always M&Ms. So it was mostly a nostalgia thing, but also because I knew the candies would fit well, and who doesn't like M&Ms? After I finished stamping my candies inside the globe, I die cut the globe and the little hole where the candies will come out of with the coordinating dies. Next, it was time to start working on my inner workings of this card. In order to make the candies come out of the hole, I needed a way to funnel them down to the hole. So I designed a piece in Sure Cuts a Lot, the software that I use to design SVGs to use with my Cricut, to funnel my candies to the hole. I cut the design 3 times out of craft foam. If you do not have an electronic machine like a Cricut, you could probably cut this piece by hand. It doesn't have to be pretty, it won't be seen. Once they are cut, you need to adhere them together. You see on the video that I used liquid glue. For some reason, this did not work well for me. I ended up turning off the camera to figure out something else and forgot to turn the camera back on. I found that score tape worked much better to adhere the foam pieces together. However, I left this clip in so that I could remember to tell you that this did not work for me. Although, I have seen other crafters use liquid glue on craft foam before, so your experience may vary depending on what glue you're using. I was using Nuvo Deluxe adhesive, which usually works well for anything else that I've used it for. Next, I needed to punch a hole for the brad for my handle. None of my hole punches would reach where I needed them to. They were all just a tiny bit too short, or the hole they punched would be too big. So I grabbed my old trusty We Are Memory Keepers Big Bite, and I punched the smallest hole setting on it right in the middle of that stamped handle. I needed a piece to close off the hole where the candy comes out that would attach to the handle, so I measured from the hole I just punched to the bottom of the opening where the candy will come out. I decided that a strip of paper about 1 inch wide and 1.5 inches long would be big enough to cover the opening. I marked the middle of the top of the strip with a pencil so that I could pierce my hole with a pokey tool for my brad to go through. Next, I added the acetate to the globe section of my card with score tape. After that, I used some hot glue to add the brad to my handle that I made earlier in the video. As the glue was cooling, I rolled the brad in between my fingers to conform the excess hot glue to the brad. I stuck the newly made handle through the hole of my card, making sure that it lined up with the handle stamped on the front of the card. I added the strip of paper I cut to cover the hole and used a scrap piece of paper under the handle in front to shim it a little bit to make sure that I didn't put the handle on too tight while I opened the brad in the back of the card. You don't want to have it on too tight, as you want the handle to move freely. After opening up the brad in the back, I double-checked to make sure that my handle matched the stamped handle again, and that my strip of paper was vertical on the back of the card. Then I applied hot glue to the back of the brad to secure it to the strip of paper that would close and open the candy dispensing opening. After getting all that working, it was time to adhere the foam funnel part to the back of my card front. Off camera, I had already applied score tape to the foam pieces. You want to make sure that you only place adhesive on the outer edges of this piece, as the strip that closes and opens the candy dispenser will slide behind the foam. If that doesn't make sense, it will in a minute. Now that I have it adhered, see how the strip slides back and forth between the foam and the card front? That is why you don't want to have adhesive too close to this piece, and I suggest only placing it around the outer edges. Here are some close-up pictures of the finished card with the candy dispenser closed and the candy dispenser open. And now we're going to talk about a big mistake that I made. See how this foam is showing at the bottom of my candy dispensing hole? Yeah, I made a prototype of this and everything was working fairly well. However, my funnel piece was fairly narrow and was causing a drag on that cardstock flap that slides back and forth. So I thought that I would fix it by making the funnel part wider for the final project. I must have moved the placement up or made it shorter or something on accident. Not really sure which, because the placement of my gumball stamp did not change, as I had left that in my stamp positioner throughout this entire process. Anyways, mistakes were made, and we are going to fix them. I removed the foam pieces from the card front, lined that piece up where it needed to be to work right, and marked where the foam needed to be cut off, and I cut it with my guillotine cutter. Then I simply adhered it back on. Fairly simple, right? Thankfully. Next, I added 2 strips of paper to act as stoppers for the strip that closes off the dispenser, so that the strip doesn't show in the gumball machine globe. They also act as a slight shim to help the strips move a little more freely between the foam layer and the card front. I want to say that I cut these strips at maybe a 1/4 inch by 1.5 inches or maybe 2 inches long, and then I folded them in half to make them a little thicker. I don't really think that you have to have exact measurements here though. Then I turned the handle on my gumball machine to the position where it was all the way open but not showing through the gumball machine window, and I glued the shim in place. I repeated the same steps for the other side. After that, I needed to make a hole to fill the candy. I could have just sealed the candy up when I put the card front on. However, since I plan to show how the candy comes out in the video, I kind of wanted to make it easy to put the candy back in. Plus, this card is going to my niece, and she may want to refill it when the candy's gone. I was recently told that she said her auntie makes the best cards. So I have a feeling this one's going to be a fan favorite and may need to be refilled. I started by marking the middle of the card base front by using my T-square ruler. Then I took the smallest die in my Spellbinders Nestabilities Grand Labels 4 die set and set it on there. I was using that middle mark that I just made to line it up with the point on the die. However, then I realized that I still needed to add the inside globe piece that I had stamped with the candies earlier in the video and had to figure out how in the world I was going to get that lined up without using the card front piece, since I had already attached it to the foam and the acetate now. I've said this many times, my lack of pre-planning gets me in these pickles. It took me a few tries of placing it down on my card base and trying to line it up with that window. Once I thought it was close, I used post-it tape to tape it down, and then I picked up my card and looked at it from all sides to make sure that it was indeed in the right place. Then I used the post-it tape as a hinge to glue it down in the right spot. Once it was glued down, then I went back to the Grand Labels die and figured out how I wanted it placed and taped it down with the post-it tape. I don't often show any part of the die cutting on screen, but I did want to show my plates here as I am going to be doing some partial die cutting to get my refill door in the on the card base. I only want to cut the top little bit of this die to get the door that I want to put the candies in, so most of my card will not be sandwiched under the plates. I am using a Spellbinders Grand Caliber machine. My Gemini and I broke up. Long story for another day, maybe. So, this is the only metal die cutting machine that I have at the moment. I am really hoping to get another electric one soon, as cranking is just too hard on my messed up hands and arms. Anyways, back to the card. For this machine, I put my cutting plate on the bottom, paper on the top of that, die cutting side down on top of the paper, and then I put the base plate on top of that, and only put it on top of the section that I wish to cut. What that plate isn't covering will not cut. My footage got kind of blurry of what it looked like just after I took it out of the machine, so I cut that out. Here I am scoring from the bottom of where the cut line stopped to make a hinged door. You will get to see the door a little bit better in a minute. Since I cut just below of where the gumball stamped globe was and had to score across the top of it, I did have to apply some more glue to the top of that image to adhere it better, since the act of scoring and folding made the edge come up a little bit. No biggie. I wanted to stamp my inside sentiment before adhering the card front to the card base. I chose the I Heart You sentiment from the I Choose You stamp set. I stamped it in Festive Berries Distress Oxide. I'm really not sure why I chose this ink over the Stampin' Up! Real Red that I had already previously used on the card. Maybe force of habit. Anyways, that's what I used and it was fine. After stamping my sentiment, then I applied my card front to my card base. I had already applied score tape to the back of the foam on the card front off screen. You don't have to be careful about avoiding any areas on this part. Just apply adhesive wherever your heart desires. After getting that adhered, I had to trim up my card base to match my card front. I often have to do this as I took a ream of Neenah Classic Crest Solar White 110-pound cardstock to Staples to have it cut down for card bases, and they severely messed it up. I got my money back for the cutting services, but since I didn't buy my cardstock there, I was out of luck on that. Now I get to forever trim up card bases until I run out of them, and I will not be using Staples cutting services again. This card was too thick to fit under my finger guard on my regular paper cutter, but this little Creative Memories cutter has a removable guard, and I was able to trim it up in it, thankfully, because I don't cut straight with scissors. Next comes the fun part. I put the candies in. My original plan with this door was to make a little strip of paper that point in the die cut would slide underneath to keep it closed. However, I decided that it may not look real pretty, and for little hands it may get ripped or pulled apart. So instead of that, I just picked a colorful piece of washi that to me kind of looked like candy pieces to keep it closed. Oh, and did you catch that loose piece of candy fly off? Yeah, I had to test that one for quality control. So then, once everything is all together, you just turn the handle, put your hand underneath, and shake the candies out. Yeah, those needed to be tested for quality control too. Then you twist the handle and close it again. After I got done, I just felt like this card was, well, kind of boring on the front. Sure, I could have added a sentiment strip and called it a day, but that's not the way I roll. If you have been here before, you know I apparently like to take the hard road. Yeah, we're going to stamp on this super dimensional card with an acrylic block. I know, I should have done this before I assembled the darn thing. Again, not a pre-planner. So I picked the sentiment, "You're Gumbelievable," from the I Choose You stamp set, and I stamped that in Gina K amalgam ink underneath the Gumball machine. Then I pulled out most of the same colors that I used for the candies that I stamped on the inside of the globe, and I stamped hearts all around the Gumball machine. Amazingly, I managed not to screw it up. I was pretty shocked. I thought for sure this was going to be a disaster. Again, if you've been here before, you know I hate to use an acrylic block, and I probably lose brain cells from holding my breath while stamping with them. Then, to finish off the card, I just had to subject myself to stamping a few more of those hearts on the inside of the card with an acrylic block again. I'm a glutton for punishment. I hope that you enjoyed the card today and maybe even learned something new or got some inspiration to try something fun. I hope that you will take the time to hop to the other creators in this Team Tiny Hop. Remember that you can find the hashtag to click on in my video title or my description box below. If you haven't already, I sure would appreciate it if you would subscribe to my channel and give this video a like. Also, I always love hearing from you in the comments below. As always, have a great day.